A very calm day in the mountain village. The village was small, peaceful, and surrounded by long stretches of forest that looked beautiful in the early morning light. Most people living there had known each other since childhood. Life moved slowly, and people rarely expected anything unusual to happen. But on that one day, something strange started long before anyone noticed it. Rian, a quiet and observant young man, had left his home early to take a walk along the forest path. He liked exploring the mountains, not because he was adventurous, but because it helped him think. He always said that the forest made his mind feel lighter. Birds singing above him, the smell of damp leaves, and the soft wind rushing across the trees gave him a kind of peace he never found anywhere else. Most mornings passed the same way, but that day, his steps paused when he saw a faint gray line in the sky above the cliff's dot. At first, he didn't think much of it. A thin column of smoke sometimes rose from the forest when people cooked or burned dry leaves. But this one felt different. It wasn't the usual light scent he recognized. It was darker, heavier. He stared at it for a moment, unsure whether he was imagining it. Then a thought hit him. There was a system of caves near that cliff. Those caves were part of an old legend in the village. People believed rare creatures lived there, creatures that most villagers had never actually seen. They were called sky-fire dragons by the elders. According to stories, these dragons stayed hidden deep inside the mountains and never bothered humans. Many people didn't believe such creatures were real, but the elders insisted the stories had truth behind them. Rian had walked near those caves many times before, but he had never gone inside. He respected the stories and never wanted to disturb anything sacred. Today, however, the smoke was coming exactly from that direction. He stopped on the trail and stared again, trying to convince himself that it was nothing serious. But the more he looked, the more uneasy he became. Smoke rising from a cave could only mean trouble. He turned around and hurried back toward the village. As he walked, the smoke became more visible behind him, spreading slowly across the sky. When he reached the main road of the village, a few people were gathered outside their houses, talking about their day. Rian quickly went to them and pointed toward the cliffs. "Do you see that?" he asked, slightly out of breath. A couple of villagers squinted at the smoke. One man shrugged and said it was probably just a small fire caused by dry branches or sunlight hitting the rocks. Another person said the forest sometimes smoked when old leaves burned. No one seemed worried. They all trusted that nature handled itself, but Rian felt something was off. He explained that the smoke was coming from near the cave openings. Someone laughed lightly and said the caves were just rocks and dust, not worth worrying about. No one thought anything dangerous could come from there. Still, Rian couldn't shake off the strange feeling in his chest. The smoke was spreading faster now. Its color darkened from light gray to deep charcoal. His eyes kept returning to it. Something inside him whispered that a simple forest fire wouldn't look like that. And even if it was just a fire, what if it spread further? One of the village elders happened to pass by. Rian walked up to him and explained what he had seen. The elder listened, but his calm face didn't change much. He placed a hand on Rian's shoulder and said, "Fires come and go, my son. The mountain has seen worse." But then the elder glanced up toward the cliffs and paused for a long moment. Rian saw his eyes narrow slightly. It was the kind of look someone gives when they see something they wish wasn't true. The elder didn't say anything, but his silence made Rian more worried. Even with that, the elder walked away slowly, telling Rian not to stress too much. Rian stood there, unsure what to do. He felt like the only one noticing the real danger. He took another step toward the mountain, then stopped, then took another. His mind was torn between two thoughts: go back home and trust the others, or go toward the cliffs and check for himself. Finally, a strong wave of instinct pushed him forward. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Whether it was fear or responsibility or just curiosity, something made him walk quickly out of the village and back onto the forest trail. The air felt warmer than before, as if the fire had grown stronger. The smell of smoke was now sharp enough for him to notice without looking up. He walked faster. The trees around him rustled in the dry heat, and the closer he went, the more a faint crackling sound reached his ears. It wasn't loud enough to scare him, but it was enough to make his heartbeat rise. The ground under his feet was still cool, but small ashes floated in the air, drifting like black snowflakes as he climbed the slope toward the main entrance of the cave system. He stopped to catch his breath. Smoke curled from the opening like dark mist. It didn't behave like normal smoke from burning wood. It had a thicker, heavier appearance, as if something deeper inside was burning. He stepped closer, lifted his shirt to cover his nose, and listened. For a moment, he didn't hear anything. But then, very faintly, he heard a soft sound, something between a whimper and a squeak. He froze. The noise came again, slightly clearer this time. Like small cries, it didn't sound like a human voice. It didn't sound like any animal he knew either. It was tiny, scared, and desperate. His breath caught in his throat. He slowly stepped into the mouth of the cave, just enough for the shade to block the sunlight. Inside, the air was thick and hot. The walls reflected a weak orange glow from the flames deeper inside. The sound came again, several little cries, all from the same direction. He took another cautious step. The smoke stung his eyes, but he blinked through it. The cries grew louder. For a moment, he imagined it might be small forest animals trapped inside. Maybe baby foxes or bats. But something about the sound felt different, almost layered, like each cry had a slight echo in it. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and took another few steps deeper. The temperature rose quickly. He could feel the heat pressing against his face. His heart hammered inside his chest, but he kept going because those cries sounded more distressed every second. The cave floor shook suddenly under his feet. A loud pop echoed from the back chambers, maybe a burst of rock or a part of the fire flaring up. Instinctively, Rian stepped back, gripping the wall for support. The cries turned sharper, more urgent, as if whatever was inside understood the danger better than he did. His mind raced. Should he go in? Should he go back? Should he call someone? But if he left now, he knew the cries might stop. And if they stopped, it could mean something terrible. He swallowed hard. He didn't know whether it was bravery or foolishness, but he made his decision. He would go in just far enough to see what was crying. He told himself he would turn back if the fire grew too strong. He took a deep breath, covered his mouth again, and carefully walked deeper into the cave. The path curved slightly, giving him more shade, but also trapping more heat. His eyes watered from the smoke, and the faint glowing orange color painted the walls around him. The cries guided him like small echoes bouncing off stone. Then, as he reached a wider space inside the cave, he froze completely. There, huddled against the corner, were 5 tiny creatures small enough to fit in his hands. They had shimmering scales, weak glowing patterns on their bodies, and soft wings curled tightly around themselves. Their eyes were wide with fear, and they cried out again when the flames behind them hissed and crackled. Rian stared, stunned. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. These weren't forest animals. These were dragon hatchlings, real ones, fragile, helpless. And trapped, the fire behind them crept closer with every passing second. Rian realized with a cold shock running through him that no one else was coming. No one believed there was a real danger here. No one believed the caves held anything alive. It was just him. And them. For a moment, he stood there without moving. The heat pressed against his skin, the smoke burned his throat, and the cries echoed in the small chamber. He felt his hands shake from fear and disbelief. But then something inside him shifted. A quiet thought formed in his mind, a simple one. They were alive. They needed help, and he was the only one who could help them right now. He stepped forward slowly, trying not to scare them. The hatchlings watched him with trembling bodies. He reached for his jacket, removed it, and crouched down. Their tiny claws clicked softly on the cave floor as they backed further into the wall. "It's okay," he whispered softly, even though he knew they couldn't understand his words. "I won't hurt you." The fire behind them flared again, making them cry louder. Rian wrapped the jacket open like a small blanket and slowly leaned closer. He didn't know how dangerous they could be, even as babies, but nothing in them looked threatening now. They only looked scared. When he got close enough, one of the hatchlings crawled weakly into the jacket, as if it was giving up. The others followed, tiny bodies shaking. Rian gently lifted the jacket, holding them carefully inside. Their heat was strange warm, but not burning, almost like holding small stones that had been in the sun. He stepped backward one slow step at a time, keeping his body between them and the flame's dot as he reached the bend in the path. The smoke thickened, and he coughed hard. Every breath hurt. But he held the jacket tighter and kept going until daylight finally appeared at the cave entrance. He didn't know what would happen next. Rian stood at the entrance of the cave with the 5 tiny hatchlings bundled inside his jacket. The sunlight outside looked blurry because his eyes were stinging from the smoke. For a moment, he wasn't sure what to do. His hands trembled slightly, either from the heat of the cave or from the shock of what he had just seen. The little creatures inside the jacket made soft, weak sounds that reminded him of newborn kittens. Their breath was warm against his skin, and their tiny wings twitched every few seconds. He took a shaky breath and stepped fully out of the cave. Fresh air washed over him, cool and soothing compared to the thick smoke inside. But that relief lasted only a moment. When he turned around, he saw how quickly the fire was spreading within the cave. Flames flickered against the stones like they were trying to escape outward. Ash floated in the air and settled on his hair and clothes. The hatchlings cried out again, and the sound snapped him back into focus. He needed to move. Standing still wouldn't help them, and it wouldn't help him either. He adjusted his grip on the jacket so the babies stayed close together and didn't slip out. Their tiny glowing scales pressed gently against the fabric. He started walking down the slope, careful not to trip on the uneven rocks. The forest around him felt tense, almost silent. Even the birds seemed to know something unusual was happening. The wind carried the smell of smoke, mixing with a natural scent of pine. As he walked further away from the cave mouth, his breathing became a little easier, though his chest still felt heavy from everything he had inhaled earlier. He paused after a few minutes to rest against a tree trunk. Sweat trickled down the side of his face, and he wiped it with the back of his hand. The hatchlings shifted inside the jacket, their small noses poking out slightly as if testing the air. Their tiny eyes blinked slowly, still dazed from the smoke. Rian leaned his head back against the tree, trying to think clearly. Should he take them straight to the village? Would that scare people? What if they reacted badly because dragons were creatures they had only heard about in stories? The last thing he wanted was for the hatchlings to suffer more Dot at the same time. He knew he couldn't leave them alone in the forest either. They were too small to walk, too weak to fly, and too frightened to survive on their own. Their mother was nowhere in sight. He looked around again, scanning the treetops and skies, hoping to see a shadow or hear a sound that would tell him she was nearby. But there was nothing. The forest was still. He sat down gently on a patch of moss and opened the jacket a little, so the hatchlings could breathe more comfortably. They lifted their heads one by one, tiny mouths opening in soft squeaks. Their scales glowed faintly, reflecting shades of gold and orange, though the light dimmed every time one of them coughed or shivered. Rian felt a tightness in his chest, watching them like that. They looked so delicate, almost fragile, yet he could sense a hidden strength inside them, something that belonged to their species. One of the hatchlings crawled slightly toward his hand and rested its head on his palm. Its body was warm, but not painfully so. Rian hesitated before gently stroking its back with his thumb. The little creature let out a soft sound that almost felt like relief. The others slowly moved closer too, forming a small cluster of tiny glowing bodies. A wave of emotion washed over him. He had never cared for anything like this before, and he certainly never expected to be holding dragon hatchlings in his arms. The situation felt unreal, yet completely in front of him. He took another breath and whispered softly, "I'll get you all somewhere safe. I promise." Saying it out loud made him feel more certain. He couldn't take them into the village center, not yet. People needed to understand gently, not all at once. He decided to take them to the back area of the village, near the small, unused storage hut close to the stream. It was quiet there, and the hut wasn't locked most of the time. He could place them inside temporarily and bring water to help cool their tiny bodies. But first, he needed to get them out of the forest. He stood up again and carefully wrapped the jacket around them, making sure none of their wings were folded painfully. Each of them snuggled closer, seeking warmth and safety. Rian adjusted the weight in his arms so he wouldn't drop them if he stumbled. Then he started walking back toward the path that led to the village. The walk felt longer this time. Every few steps, he checked the jacket to make sure the hatchlings were fine. His heart raced whenever one of them made a sharp sound or curled up too tightly. The smoke in the air grew lighter as he moved farther away from the cave, but the heat still stayed in his body like a memory. When he finally reached the edge of the forest, he stopped again. The village was just a short distance ahead. He could hear distant voices, the sound of buckets being filled at the well, and the soft chatter of children playing far away. Everything looked normal, as if nothing unusual was happening. Rian felt a strange divide inside him. The world he had just walked through, the world of smoke, fire, and dragon hatchlings felt completely separate from this peaceful village scene. He walked carefully along the side paths, avoiding the main road so no one would accidentally see what he was carrying. Not because he wanted to hide anything forever, but because he needed to understand what the right thing to do was. The storage hut came into view. It was small and simple, with wooden walls that had faded from years of rain and sun. The stream nearby made a soft bubbling sound as water flowed gently over stones. Rian walked into the shade and let out a slow breath he didn't realize he had been holding. This place felt safe enough for now. He pushed the wooden door open with his foot and slipped inside. The air inside the hut was cool and dry. A few old baskets sat in the corner, along with tools that no one had used in years. Cobwebs hung in the corners, but the space was quiet and undisturbed. He spread his jacket on a pile of soft cloths and gently placed the hatchlings on top of it. The babies curled together immediately, comforted by the closeness. Their small breaths made the fabric rise and fall softly. Rian brought his ear close to them to check if they were breathing normally. Their breaths were shaky, but not as weak as before. He stepped outside again and jogged to the stream, cupping water in his hands and bringing it back inside. It wasn't enough, so he found an old clay bowl and filled it. When he placed it near the hatchlings, two of them crawled slowly toward it and dipped their tiny noses into the water. They drank in small gulps, their throats moving gently. The other three followed a moment later. Seeing them drink gave Rian a sense of relief that made his whole body relax. He sat down beside them, leaning against the wall of the hut. The cool air helped calm the heat inside his lungs. He listened to the soft sounds the hatchlings made and felt their presence settle something inside him. But as calm as the moment was, the reality of the situation stayed clear in his mind. What had caused the fire? Where were the adult dragons? Why were the babies left alone? He thought back to the elder's reaction earlier. The old man had paused when he saw the smoke. It wasn't the pause of someone surprised. It was the pause of someone remembering something. Something important. Rian wondered if the elders had known more about the Skyfire dragons than they ever told the younger generation. Maybe there were things they kept hidden because they feared people wouldn't understand. Or maybe the dragons were in danger long before the smoke appeared today. He looked at the hatchlings again, their glowing scales shifting softly in the dim light of the hut. They were quiet now, tired from everything they had been through. One of them stretched its tiny wings in a sleepy motion, touching lightly against another's back. Rian felt something stir inside him again, not fear this time, but a sense of responsibility. He hadn't planned any of this. He hadn't expected to be the one to find them. But now that he had, he couldn't just walk away. The sound of distant footsteps made him stiffen. He peeked through the small window of the hut and saw a villager walking down the path, carrying a basket of herbs. Rian waited silently until the footsteps faded away. He knew he couldn't hide the hatchlings forever. Sooner or later, someone would discover them. And when they did, everything in the village might change. But that was a problem for later. Right now, they needed protection, rest, and someone to care for them. And Rian, whether he liked it or not, was the only person who knew the truth. He looked at the tiny creatures once more and whispered quietly, "You're safe now. I'll keep you safe, no matter what." The hatchlings seemed to settle into their soft nest even more after hearing his voice, as if they understood the promise in his tone. Outside, the sky darkened slowly as day began to shift into evening. The forest behind the village still carried a thin line of smoke. The air felt heavy with secrets, but the hut felt peaceful. Rian leaned his head back, closed his eyes for a moment, and let the quietness wrap around him. He knew tomorrow would bring new challenges. People would ask questions. The elders might reveal old truths. The mother dragon might return. But for now, all that mattered was the small, warm, shimmering forms resting safely beside him. He wasn't just protecting them. He was connected to them now. Whether he was ready or not, his life had changed. Rian didn't sleep much that night. He stayed inside the old storage hut, sitting beside the hatchlings as they rested on the pile of soft cloth. Every time one of them shifted or made a tiny sound in its sleep, Rian opened his eyes again. The fear of something happening to them kept him alert. At moments, he even felt guilty for blinking too long, like he might miss something important. The hut was quiet, except for the soft breathing of the little dragons. Their scales glowed slightly in the dim light, creating a warm shimmer around them. It looked beautiful, almost magical, but Rian didn't have time to enjoy the sight. His mind was busy thinking about what he should do next. The fire in the cave, the missing mother dragon, and the strange behavior of the elders. None of it made sense. Just before dawn, the hatchlings started moving. One of them stretched its tiny wings, brushing against Rian's hand. Another yawned, showing a mouth no bigger than a pebble. Their movements were slow at first, like they were still tired, but soon they began crawling around the cloth, squeaking softly to one another. Rian smiled a little. Seeing them awake made him feel relieved. It meant they were getting better. They still looked fragile, but their eyes were more alert, and their breathing sounded steadier. He reached for the clay bowl and checked the water. It was half empty. He stood up quietly so he wouldn't startle them and stepped outside to refill it at the stream. The morning air was cold, and a faint gray mist hung between the trees. Rian could still smell the smoke from the cave, but it was lighter now. Maybe the fire had burned out overnight, or maybe it had moved deeper inside the mountain dot as he crouched near the stream. He remembered how close the flames were when he carried the hatchlings out. The thought made his chest tighten. If he had arrived just a few minutes later, he probably wouldn't have found them alive. He filled the bowl, washed his face, and let the cool water wake him fully. When he returned to the hut, the hatchlings were waiting at the edge of the jacket, their tiny eyes following him. They squeaked softly, as if asking where he had gone. Rian set the bowl down gently, and they eagerly drank from it. After they finished, one of them tried to climb onto his lap. Rian lifted it carefully and placed it there, feeling its warm little body settle against him. The creature looked up at him with an expression he couldn't describe, something between trust and curiosity. "You're getting brave," he whispered. The others followed, climbing onto his legs and curling close to his arms. He didn't know if dragons behaved like this, but he guessed they might be treating him as a protector. Or maybe they were just cold. Either way, the warmth of their tiny bodies comforted him more than he expected. But the peace didn't last long. As the sun rose higher, the sounds of villagers waking up filled the air. Footsteps passed near the hut. Voices chatted nearby. At one point, someone even walked close enough that Rian held his breath, afraid they might open the door. But no one did. Still, he knew he couldn't hide the hatchlings the whole day. People would eventually notice if he didn't show up, and he had no idea how long the babies needed to stay hidden. He didn't even know what dragons ate. Would the villagers panic if they saw them? Would someone try to harm them out of fear? He couldn't risk that. He spent the next hour sitting in silence, thinking about his choices. Every answer led to more questions. Every idea felt risky. He wanted to protect them, but he also needed help. He couldn't keep 5 dragon hatchlings alive alone, not when he didn't understand them, not when he didn't know if their mother would return. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden tremor. It was small, just enough to make the wooden floor vibrate slightly. The hatchlings stiffened. Their tiny bodies tensed, and their glowing scales flickered as if reacting to some unseen signal. Rian froze and looked toward the door. Another tremor followed, this one stronger. Dust fell from the hut's roof. A soft rumble echoed through the ground. Rian's heart thumped inside his chest. He knew that feeling. It was the same vibration he felt in the cave the day he saved them. He hurried to the window and peeked outside. The forest was calm. The village looked normal, but the tremors kept coming. Steady and rhythmic, the hatchlings began making anxious sounds, huddling together as if frightened. Rian didn't know what was causing the tremors, but something inside him whispered that they had something to do with the dragons. He grabbed his jacket again and wrapped the hatchlings inside it, leaving space for them to breathe. Their bodies shook slightly with fear. He held them close, whispering, "It's okay. It's okay. I've got you." Another tremor hit harder this time. Rian almost lost his balance. Then, deep in the forest, a sound echoed. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a scream. It was more like a long, heavy groan, mixed with the rumble of earth shifting. It made the leaves tremble and the birds fly out of the trees. The hatchlings cried out. Rian felt fear crawl up his spine, but he stepped out of the hut anyway. Whatever was happening, he had to be ready. He walked toward the forest edge, carrying the hatchlings tightly. The jacket felt heavier now, either because he was scared or because the babies sensed the danger and clung to him harder. The sound came again, closer this time. The air felt thicker, almost like a storm was coming. Branches moved even though the wind wasn't blowing. The ground vibrated beneath his feet, and then he saw it. Smoke rising again, not from the cave this time, but from deeper in the mountain, from a place he had never seen smoke before. The hatchlings growled softly inside the jacket, a tiny but unmistakable sound. Rian stepped back. His mind raced. Was the fire spreading? Was something inside the mountain shifting? Or was someone or something looking for the hatchlings? The thought chilled him. He glanced toward the village and saw a few people staring at the new smoke in confusion. A couple pointed at the mountain, whispering. The elders stepped out of their homes, their eyes dark with something Rian couldn't decipher. Fear, recognition, or maybe regret. Whatever it was, it wasn't simple confusion. Rian's stomach twisted. One of the elders began walking toward the forest path. Rian panicked and ducked behind a tree, holding the jacket close. The hatchlings whimpered softly. He whispered to them to stay quiet. The elder stopped near the start of the forest, staring up at the mountain. His expression wasn't calm like before. It was tense, worried, even angry. Rian heard him mutter under his breath, "It's happening too soon." Too soon? What did that even mean? Rian didn't want to stay hidden, but the elder's words made him freeze. He felt like there were too many secrets he didn't know, and every minute, more of them were breaking open. He stayed behind the tree until the elder walked away. Then he hurried back to the hut, his heart pounding, his hands shaking. He set the hatchlings down gently on the cloth again. Their glowing scales flickered, reflecting their fear. Rian sat on the floor, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. He couldn't think clearly when everything felt like it was happening at once. He watched the hatchlings as they huddled together. Their small bodies trembled with every distant rumble. One of them walked toward him and nudged his hand softly. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a plea for safety. Rian exhaled slowly. He didn't know what was happening deep inside the mountain. He didn't know if the mother dragon was alive, injured, or returning. But he did know one thing. The hatchlings needed him, and he couldn't just sit and wait for something to come to them, especially if that something was dangerous. He stood up and looked around the hut. It wasn't strong. It wasn't safe enough. If anything large came searching for the hatchlings, the hut wouldn't survive. And even if the mother dragon returned, seeing her babies inside a human place might frighten or anger her. He needed to move them. But where? He paced in small circles, the wooden floor creaking under his steps. His mind raced through possibilities. The forest? Too open. His house? Too risky. The mountains? Too close to whatever was causing the tremors. Every answer felt wrong. Then he remembered something. The stream. A long path followed the stream deeper into a quiet valley on the other side of the village. Hardly anyone went there. It was peaceful, surrounded by tall rocks and wide trees. If there was a place hidden enough to keep the hatchlings safe for a little while, it might be there. He picked up the jacket again. The hatchlings crawled onto it without hesitation this time, as if trusting him completely. Rian placed the jacket over his chest, securing the edges so the babies wouldn't fall. He walked out of the hut, choosing a path that avoided the main roads. Every tremor behind him reminded him that time was running out. Didn't know what waited for him in the valley. He didn't know if he was making the right choice, but he knew this. He would not let anything harm them, not fire, not fear, not the unknown. He tightened his grip on the jacket and walked forward. Whatever came next, he would face it with them, together. The next morning came quietly, almost too quietly for someone whose life had been nothing but fire, smoke, and chaos just a day earlier. She woke up feeling as if her whole body had been pressed between stones. Every muscle ached, especially her arms, which still carried the phantom weight of the tiny hatchlings she had pulled from the burning den. For a long moment she stayed still, staring at the soft glow of light filtering through the curtains, trying to process how much had changed in such a short time. she couldn't forget the feeling of their warm, trembling bodies against her chest. It was strange. Those creatures were supposed to be dangerous, wild, unpredictable. Yet in those minutes, when the heat was choking and the smoke was blinding, they had felt almost like scared children, whose only hope was her arms wrapped around them. She had never planned to be that person, never imagined she would ever step into a dragon's den, let alone run out of it with 5 tiny lives pressed against her heart. She slowly sat up, trying not to wake the old couple who had offered her a place to rest. They had heard the noise last night, dragons thundering in the sky, guards shouting, villagers panicking. The moment they saw her stumbling through the pathway with the hatchlings wrapped in a blanket, they did not ask questions. They simply ushered her inside. Her mind replayed the night again. After handing over the hatchlings to the dragon guardians, she had barely spoken. Her voice was gone. Her throat was raw from smoke. But even more, her heart was heavy with the weight of everything she had seen. She remembered the mother dragon's eyes. They were ancient, powerful, but she had seen fear in them. Real fear. Not the kind that made someone run, but the kind that made someone freeze, unsure if the next breath would come. This morning, the weight of that memory still pressed deeply on her. She washed her face with cold water and stepped outside. The village looked different today. People who usually hurried through the roads now stood in small groups, whispering. Some looked tired, some looked afraid, and some looked strangely hopeful. The smoke in the distance was much lighter than before, but the smell still lingered. She walked slowly toward the hillside clearing where she had dropped off the hatchlings the night before. On the way, she heard a few villagers talking. "Did you see it? That young woman carrying all of them? 5. Who even does that? I can't even carry 1 sack of grain without crying. Dragons didn't attack last night. They circled above the forest, but didn't harm anyone. Maybe they understood. That what she did was for them?" The words drifted around her, but she kept walking. She didn't know how to feel about people talking about her like that. She hadn't done it for praise or attention. She had done it because those tiny creatures were alive, scared, and helpless. Anyone with a heart would have done the same at least. That's what she believed. When she reached the clearing, she felt a strange stillness. The air seemed cleaner here. No smoke, no heat. Just the soft rustle of wind passing through tall grass. At first, she thought no one was there, but then she heard a low sound, almost like a deep hum. She followed the sound until she saw them. The mother dragon was resting near the trees, her large wings folded tightly against her sides. Her scales shimmered in the sunlight, no longer dulled by ash. She looked tired but strong. And surrounding her safe, warm, and lively were the 5 hatchlings. They were playing with small stones, bumping into each other clumsily, their wings fluttering like oversized leaves. It was the complete opposite of how she had last seen them, weak, coughing, barely breathing. She froze, unsure whether she should move closer or stay where she stood. The mother dragon lifted her head. For a moment, everything felt impossibly quiet. The dragon did not roar, did not glare, did not move aggressively. Instead, she slowly lowered her head to the ground, her eyes focused on the young woman with a strange softness. It wasn't fear. It wasn't suspicion. It was gratitude. The young woman felt a lump rise in her throat. She wasn't used to moments like this, moments where a creature so strong, so mighty, looked at her as if she mattered, as if her actions had changed something important. She took a careful step closer. The hatchlings noticed her and chirped, wobbling toward her in their tiny, excited way. One of them nudged her foot with its warm snout. Another flapped its wings so hard it fell over, making her laugh for the first time in days. She crouched down and gently ran her fingers over the smooth scales of the nearest hatchling. It leaned into her touch, letting out a soft sound that felt almost like a purr. The mother dragon watched with calm eyes. For a moment, the world felt peaceful. A few minutes passed before heavy footsteps broke the quiet. She turned to see the dragon guardians approaching. They looked more composed today, less frantic than the night before. One of them stepped forward. He spoke gently, without raising his voice. "We didn't get the chance to thank you properly last night," he said. "What you did? We have no words for it." She shook her head. "I just did what anyone would do." The guardian smiled softly. "You'd be surprised how many wouldn't." Another guardian walked toward the mother dragon and checked her wings and injuries. The dragon leaned slightly, allowing the inspection. It was clear she trusted them. It was also clear that something had shifted between the dragons and the humans. The guardian turned back to her. "The mother dragon recognizes your scent. She knows you protected her young." His tone became more respectful. "She wants you near them as they recover. You can stay if you choose." She looked at the hatchlings again, who were still buzzing around her feet. Her heart warmed at the sight of them. She didn't know what her answer should be, but she knew one thing. She could feel something changing inside her. Something about the way they trusted her felt heavy and meaningful, but she also felt a flicker of fear. What if the mother dragon changed her mind? What if the rest of the dragons didn't approve? What if the villagers didn't? Yet, as she watched the hatchlings tumbling across the grass, she knew deep down that leaving them now would hurt far more than staying. Before she could respond, another sound rose from behind the trees, a deep, distant rumble. Not angry. More like a call. The guardians looked at each other immediately. "That's the elder," one of them said quietly. The young woman blinked. "The elder? The oldest dragon in this region," he explained. He must have heard what happened. A wave of tension filled the air. The guardians straightened their backs. The mother dragon lifted her head sharply. Even the hatchlings froze for a beat before climbing into her lap. The forest shifted as something massive approached. The young woman suddenly felt her heartbeat quicken. Was this good? Was this bad? Was she about to face another test she wasn't ready for? The guardian stepped closer to her, almost protectively. "Don't be afraid," he said. "The elder rarely comes down from the mountains. But if he's coming today, it must mean something important." She nodded slowly, even though her palms had turned cold. Trees swayed, leaves trembled. The ground vibrated under her feet. And then, through the shadows, the elder dragon appeared huge, ancient, with scales that looked as if they held memories older than any human village. He stopped a short distance away, eyes glowing with a calm, wise intensity. He looked at the mother dragon, then at the hatchlings, and finally, at her. Her breath caught. The guardian whispered, "He knows." The elder dragon lowered his head, not out of threat, but in a deep, deliberate gesture of respect. Her eyes widened. Her heart pounded. She had never imagined she would receive such an honor, especially from a creature older than history itself. The moment stretched into a stillness. She could feel inside her bones. And without speaking a single word, the elder dragon made it clear. Her actions had reached beyond one night, beyond one den, beyond one family. They had reached the ancient heart of the dragons themselves. Everything was about to change because of that. She stood there frozen, watching the elder dragon's enormous head bow in front of her. It didn't feel real. For a moment, she wondered if she was still dreaming and would wake up in the small guest room with sunlight on her face. But the cold breeze brushing against her skin, the warm ground under her feet, and the soft chirping of the hatchlings reminded her that this was happening, truly happening. The elder dragon raised his head slowly. His eyes, silver and ancient, studied her with a strange softness, as if he were looking straight into her heart. She had never seen eyes like that. They held age, wisdom, pain, hope, and something she couldn't name. Something she didn't know she needed. She felt her throat tighten and her hands tremble at her sides. The guardian standing next to her broke the silence. "He acknowledges you," he whispered. "He knows you risked your life for the hatchlings." She glanced at the guardian, then back at the towering creature. "I didn't think. I just ran." "The best acts aren't planned," the guardian replied softly. "They come from instinct." The elder dragon let out a low rumble, neither loud nor threatening. It felt like a message, but she didn't understand. The guardian stepped forward and listened carefully. After a moment, he turned back to her. "He says the fire was not natural," the guardian translated. "He says you deserve to know the truth." She stared at him. "What truth?" The guardian took a small breath before continuing. "He says the fire started deep in the forest, from a fault in the underground heat chambers. Sometimes the earth breathes too fiercely. The dragons knew it could happen one day. They tried to prevent it. But when it came yesterday, they could not reach the den in time." Her mind returned to the moment she saw the smoke rising and the panic that followed. She had blamed the fire on something careless, maybe a spark carried from a cooking pit or someone burning dry leaves. She never imagined the earth itself had caused it. A quiet ache settled in her chest. "So it wasn't because of humans." "No," the guardian said. "And the dragons know you are not responsible. They know you helped." The mother dragon lowered her head toward the elder dragon, as if silently thanking him for explaining. The hatchlings peeked over her broad wings, curious but cautious. She felt a strange relief. Even though she had never thought she'd be blamed, it mattered to her that the dragons understood she had only tried to help. She had entered the burning den on pure instinct, without thinking about consequences or danger. She never expected this moment, this gentle respect from creatures who could. Flattened mountains. The elder dragon stepped back and spread his wings. The wind swept across the clearing, rustling leaves and stirring dust. The mother dragon lifted her head, but kept, her wings wrapped tightly around her little ones. The elder dragon bowed once more, and then slowly turned toward the forest. Before disappearing into the trees, he gave her one last look. Not a warning, not a threat, a blessing. She didn't know how she understood it, but she felt it. Something deep inside her chest warned. The guardians watched silently as the elder dragon vanished. When the sound of his footsteps faded, the clearing returned to its calm, peaceful stillness. One guardian spoke softly. "You've been given something very rare. A dragon's respect is not something we take lightly." She let out a slow breath. "I don't feel like I earned it. I was just afraid to lose them." The guardian smiled faintly. "That is exactly why you earned it." The mother dragon shifted slightly, uncovering the hatchlings. They toddled toward her again, chirping in their tiny voices. One of them nudged her knee with its warm snout, as if urging her to sit down. Another tugged gently at the edge of her sleeve. She laughed, a soft sound that surprised even her. "They're so different today." "They know they're safe," the guardian said. "And they remember you." She lowered herself to the grass and let the hatchlings climb into her lap. Two curled up instantly, warm and soft, while the smallest one tried to nibble on her shoelace. She stroked their scales gently, amazed at how much energy they had now. Their breaths were steady, their wings fluttering playfully. The mother dragon watched her with calm eyes, and the moment felt peaceful. Strangely peaceful, considering the chaos of the last 2 days. The guardian turned toward her again. "The dragons had decided you are welcome to visit them any time. If you wish, you can help us care for the hatchlings as they grow stronger." Her heart skipped. "Me? Why me?" The guardian shrugged lightly. "Sometimes the right person appears at the right time. You came when the fire was swallowing the den. You carried them out when no one else dared. That is enough." She looked at the hatchlings cuddled against her legs. She felt their warmth, their trust, and their tiny breaths. She had never seen herself as special. She wasn't a warrior or a healer or someone trained for danger. She was just someone who ran toward a fire because she knew there were lives inside that needed help. But maybe sometimes that was enough. After a long while, the guardians gently picked up the hatchlings, placing them near their mother so they could rest. She stood slowly, wiping dust from her clothes. When she turned to leave, the smallest hatchling squeaked loudly and flapped its tiny wings toward her. As if begging her not to go, she crouched down again. "I'll come back," she whispered. "I promise." The hatchling tilted its head and chirped softly, as if accepting her promise. She walked back toward the village with a strange mix of calm and confusion swirling inside her. People stared as she passed. Some smiled shyly, some whispered quietly, and others simply watched her with curiosity. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, but today it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt gentle. A group of children ran up to her. "Is it true?" one asked breathlessly. "You really saved 5 baby dragons?" She hesitated before answering. "I helped them, yes. But the dragons are the real protectors." The children's eyes sparkled with excitement. They asked a dozen questions. What colors the hatchlings were, whether they were heavy, whether they breathed fire yet. She answered everything she could, keeping her tone simple and friendly. When she continued walking, she felt lighter. Later in the afternoon, she returned to the old couple who had given her shelter. They greeted her warmly, offering her tea and a place to sit. The old woman touched her arm gently. "We saw the dragons circling this morning," she said. "We knew they weren't angry. We knew they were watching over something." "They're okay now," she replied softly. "The hatchlings are safe." The old man nodded approvingly. Good things come back to those who give without expecting. She smiled, quietly appreciating his words. That evening she returned to the hillside clearing once more. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft colors. The mother dragon was awake, but calm, her wings folded neatly. The hatchlings were asleep beside her, their tiny bodies rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. She sat a short distance away, close enough to feel their warmth, but far enough to respect their space. The mother dragon slowly turned her head, meeting her eyes. It wasn't a look of demand or warning. It felt like an invitation. Without fear, she moved a little closer and rested on the grass. The quiet moment stretched between them, filled with understanding that needed no words. She realized then that the story she thought had ended was actually beginning. She didn't know what her role would be, or what the coming years would bring. She didn't know whether she would watch the hatchlings grow into mighty dragons, or whether her life would take her to unexpected places. But she felt sure of one thing: she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The mother dragon blinked slowly, a gesture of quiet acceptance. The breeze shifted softly. The world felt full and alive. That for the first time in a long time. She felt completely at peace. She leaned back on her hands, watching the sky turn darker, watching the hatchlings breathe softly, watching the bond between humans and dragons repair itself right before her eyes. It was a moment she would carry with her forever. The night she realized that sometimes the smallest lives can pull out the deepest courage, and sometimes a single act of heart can change everything.